You think your food distributor is just your supplier. But if you're not managing that relationship, checking invoices, tracking prices, holding your team accountable to ordering systems, your distributor may be where your profits are quietly leaking. And let me be clear right up front. This is not about turning your distributor into the villain. That's too easy, and frankly, it lets your restaurant off the hook. The distributor has a job, you have a job. The problem starts when you confuse their job with yours. Hey there, Restaurant Pro. This is David Scott Peters, restaurant expert, coach, and creator of the Restaurant Prosperity Formula. Today, we're going to talk about why your food distributor may be costing you more than you think. And no, this is not a beat up the distributor conversation. That's lazy. This is about control. Because your distributor is not your enemy. They're also not your CFO. They are not your purchasing manager. They are not responsible for making your restaurant hit its own prime cost targets. That job belongs to you and your leadership team. So if your food costs keeps creeping up, if your invoices keep surprising you, if the same order seems to cost you more every week, the question is not who's ripping me off. The better question is, what am I not managing? That's a much more uncomfortable question, which is why it is usually the right one. Let's start with the symptom. You place what feels like the same order every week. Same product, same vendor, same rhythm, but the invoice total keeps climbing. And you start thinking, what the hell's going on here? Maybe you blame inflation. Maybe you blame the distributor. Maybe you blame the sales rep. Maybe you assume that this is just the cost of doing business. And yes, costs have moved. Food costs have been volatile. Vendors have had their own pressures. The marketplace has changed. But here's the trap. When restaurant pros blame the market for everything, they stop looking at what they can control. And that's where the money is. Because in restaurants, the money is almost always hiding in the boring stuff. Not the new menu, not the new cocktail, not the social media campaign. The boring stuff. Invoices, ordering, par levels, pricing, prep, waste, portion control, accountability. Sexy? No. Profitable? Absolutely. The misdiagnosis is thinking your distributor is either fully on your side or fully against you. Neither one is useful. Your distributor is a business. They sell products, they package, source, deliver, invoice, and support. They have margins to protect, sales goals to hit, and systems that benefit them. That doesn't make them evil. It makes them a business. And you, Restaurant Pro, are also running a business. So the relationship has to be managed like a business relationship, not like a friendship, not like a habit, and definitely not like a blind trust exercise. This is where a lot of restaurant pros get sloppy. They like the rep. The rep is friendly. The rep answers their phone. The rep saves them in an emergency. The rep has been around for years. They know the menu. They know the team. They show up with samples. They occasionally get you out of a jam. Great. That has value. But liking your rep is not the same as controlling your purchasing. A good relationship is helpful. A good system is essential. I see this all the time. A restaurant pro has used the same distributor for years. They like the rep. The rep is responsible. The rep is responsive. They get emergency deliveries. They feel taken care of. That comfort is nice. But comfort without control is expensive. And here's the dangerous part. Cost creep rarely shows up like a slap in the face. It usually shows up quietly. A case goes up a few dollars. A product gets substituted. A pack size changes. A credit never gets issued. A manager orders too much because nobody checks pars. A key item slowly drifts out of range and no one notices because everyone is busy. Then one day you run food cost and wonder why the number looks like it got into a bar fight. That's not one bad decision. That's weeks or months of unmanaged decisions tacking on top of each other. If you don't know what your key items should cost you, if you're not reviewing invoices, if your managers can order whatever they want whenever they want, if nobody's comparing price changes, then you don't have a vendor problem. You have a control problem. Let me give you a few coaching insights. First, review your weekly invoices, right? Or I should say, review your invoices every week. Not once a quarter, not when you finally get mad, every week. You want to watch your key items: proteins, dairies, oils, produce, high volume ingredients, anything that moves your food costs in a meaningful way. You're not looking at every single toothpick and ramekin like a lunatic with a clipboard. You're watching the items that matter. This is where I want restaurant pros to be practical. You don't need to make purchasing more complicated than it needs to be. You need to make it consistent. Start with the products that can hurt you: chicken, beef, seafood, cheese, fryer oil, eggs, produce staples, high volume sauces, anything that shows up again and again and again and has enough movement to change your margins. That's where cost creep hides. A few cents here, a few dollars there, a case price changes and nobody notices. The pack size changes and nobody catches it. A substitution hits the invoice and the kitchen just rolls with it. That's how profit disappears. And profit does not disappear all at once like a magic trick. It leaks. Drip by drip, invoice by invoice, order by order. Second, lock pricing where it makes sense. There are items you buy every week. You know what they are. Your team knows what they are. Your distributor knows what they are. Those items deserve a conversation, not an emotional conversation, not "you're killing me" conversation, a business conversation. You ask, what can be locked? You ask, what can be quoted? You ask, what alternatives exist? You ask, what volume commitments might change the price? That's not being cheap. That's being responsible. There's a big difference between beating up your vendor and managing your vendor. Beating up your vendor sounds like this: your prices are too high, fix it. Managing your vendor sounds like this: these are our key items. These are the volumes we buy. These are the prices we need to monitor. What can we do together to create predictability and keep these products within range? One is emotional, the other is professional, and professional wins. Third, order based on usage, not habit. This is where restaurants get sloppy. A manager opens the ordering guide and just repeats last week's order because it feels safe. The kitchen says, we always need that. Nobody checks par levels. Nobody checks waste. Nobody checks what's already on the shelves. Then you get over ordering, spoilage, theft, clutter, and inflated food cost. The order should be connected to actual usage, prep levels, sales forecast, inventory, and pars, not vibes. Vibes are for playlists, not purchasing. And here's what makes this tricky. Managers often overorder because they don't know what they need to order, and they certainly don't want to get yelled at. They would rather have too much product than run out of product. Odds are you deliver that message by yelling at one point in time, "If you 86 another item, I swear to goodness," without the budget process to be part of that. Instead, I'm going to keep myself out of trouble and I'm going to overorder. That makes sense emotionally. Nobody wants to be the manager who runs out of wings on a Friday night. But if the only way your restaurant avoids running out is by overordering everything, you don't have a smart safety net. You have expensive fear sitting on the shelf. That fear turns into waste. It turns into spoiled product. It turns into clutter in your walk-ins. It turns into sloppy counts. It turns into higher food cost. So your job is not to tell managers, just order less. That's vague and useless. Your job is to give them a system that teaches them how to order correctly. Par levels, sales forecast, prep sheets, inventory counts, waste tracking, key item tracking. Now they have a method. Fourth, build vendor accountability. That means you set expectations, you review performance, you check fill rates, you address substitutions, you challenge unexplained increases, you make the relationship professional. And by the way, this works better when you are organized. If your own ordering is chaotic, if your managers are placing emergency orders every other day, if your invoices are never reviewed, if nobody knows what you agreed to, then don't act shocked when the relationship doesn't serve you well. You have to bring discipline to the table. That is leadership. That is systems. That is accountability. And that is the real lesson here. Your distributor is not automatically the villain. The villain is the lack of systems. The villain is the unchecked invoice. The villain is the manager ordering out of habit. The villain is the restaurant pro who says, I trust my rep, but can't tell me what chicken, oil, and cheese cost last week. Trust is not a system. Trust is good. Verification is better. And this is an important leadership shift. When you blame the distributor, you give away your power. When you build a system, you take back the power. You can control what you can control. You can't control every market swing. You can't control every supply disruption. You can't control every increase that comes down the line, but you can control whether your team notices. You can control whether someone reviews the invoice. You can control whether substitutions are accepted blindly. You can control whether managers order from a system or from panic. You can control whether your distributor relationship is managed or simply inherited. That is the difference between being a victim of food costs and being a leader in your restaurant. That is why coaching matters, because when you're buried in the day-to-day, it's easy to normalize chaos. You get used to invoices being confusing. You get used to margins being tight. You get used to saying, that's just how it is. But it doesn't have to be. You don't need a new distributor first. You need control over the one you have. And sometimes, yes, after you build the system and review the relationship, you may decide it's time to stop shopping with that vendor and change suppliers. That happens. But now you're making that decision with data, not frustration. That's a much stronger position. Look, if you really want to try and dive into this quickly, do me a favor. Find out what your top 10 to 12 items you purchase are. Because I'm going to tell you right now, they represent 50% or more of your purchasing power. Now, if you work on those with your vendor, better pricing, different product, better quality or same quality, not cheaper product, but lower price, you can have a huge impact on your bottom line. That is you taking control of what you can control, not just accepting what pricing is. Restaurant Pro, if your food distributor is costing you more than you think, don't start with blame. Start with systems. Review your invoices. Watch your key items. Lock pricing where you can. Order based on usage. Hold your vendors and your managers accountable, because you don't manage what you don't measure. And unmanaged costs don't ask permission before they eat your profit. The distributor is not the villain. The missing system is. And the good news is, systems are fixable. But only if you stop blaming the invoice and start managing what created it. There's one number that's quietly killing your restaurant profits, and most owners don't even know what it should be. It's your prime cost. And right now, most restaurants are running at least 15 points higher than they should be, which means you're working harder and making less than you deserve. If you're tired of being stuck in your restaurant, tired of inconsistent or non-existent profits, then it's time to find out what's really going on. I invite you to book a free 30-minute restaurant profit finder call with my team, where you'll uncover exactly what's eating your profits and what it's costing you every single month. Just click the link in the description to get started.